Will Quinshon Judkins be a first-round pick in your rookie drafts? We'll debate on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we are looking at Ohio State running back Quinshon Judkins, who split work with Travion Henderson, who we covered in previous show. If you missed that, go check it out. Kate, let's talk about the film before we get into where we think he's going to land in our rookie drafts, his dynasty value, the analytics, all that. What did you think of the tape?
Tape is really good. Tape is really balanced. I think a lot of people are going to like Quinshon Judkins because of the fact that he feels like an all-around versatile back that can do a little bit of everything, which I think is going to make him a little bit landing spot, immune. I think we could say. 21 years old, coming out of Ohio State, former 3-star recruit, was a 4-star recruit in the transfer portal after playing 2 years at Ole Miss. 5'11", 219 pounds. He's got some power, contact balance, but some nice wiggle. Again, just a really balanced prospect overall.
I'm a big fan of Quinshon Judkins, and you're going to figure that out over the next 30 minutes or so. To me, he is a no-nonsense, downhill physical runner that can play in a gap scheme. He can play in a zone scheme. We'll talk about some player comps later on, but there just aren't very many of these backs in the NFL that have his size and that play this chaotically. This is in a good way, right? Like, he is a chaotic runner in the sense that he's got some herky-jerky motions, but that can help him break some tackles and make defenders miss. But every time you turn on the tape, like, one of my first things is, like, I would hate to try to tackle this guy. It seems like it would be a pain. And I think that's why he's ultimately going to go sometime early on day 2 of the NFL draft.
Herky-jerky is a really good way to describe just what he does overall. Now, some more just generally speaking, strengths, weaknesses. Let's talk about what he does well. You mentioned the physical downhill type of runner. No nonsense. I think a lot of what I like about Quinshon Judkins' game has to do with his footwork. I love his footwork. He's really light on his feet, despite playing with that physical downhill running style, which I think finding that balance of quick on your feet, he doesn't plant himself into the ground too hard, despite playing with all that power, which, makes him, I think, more apt to breaking some of those tackles. He's just a pretty kind of, I keep using the word balanced prospect. That brings us to the weaknesses, though, Marcus. I feel like there's nothing specifically that he does at an elite level, which I think is why we're not talking about him in the top tier of this running back class, despite the fact that he's probably going to be a very good NFL running back.
Yeah, and we'll see on Saturday. We're recording this on Friday. He said today during the media session that he plans on doing all of the drills at the NFL Combine, which is great news. It also tells me, Kate, that maybe he's been testing really well and he wants to show that off. We'll see. I expect him to run like in the low 4.5s, 4.53, 4.55. And honestly, it doesn't matter too much. Like, if it's a 4.51 or a 4.56, my opinion on him isn't really going to change. When you watch the tape, he's not really a home run hitter. He did hit some big runs, but that's just not going to be his strength in the NFL. And that's okay. He doesn't need to be a home run hitting running back to be successful in the NFL. That's just not really his role. So I think you're going to want to pair him with somebody who's more of a slasher that can give you some more explosive plays. But what you're getting is somebody that can come in and immediately give you a bunch of broken tackles, can run in the middle of any, to the teeth of any defense. You just have to know he's not somebody that's going to break a lot of tackles at the second level because of his athleticism, and he's not going to hit a bunch of home runs, but that doesn't mean he can't be a really impactful running back in the NFL.
Yeah, I think what he makes up for in terms of like the lack of second gear in the open field, he makes up for with, again, some of like the footwork, making him a little bit more elusive in that regard. It's not necessarily the speed, but I think it's the general vision, the contact balance there that he is able to maybe play through that can extend some of those runs and make them bigger plays than they may have been, you know, generally speaking. Now, let's talk about like his collegiate production because yes, played 2024 at Ohio State, but had two really solid seasons of production at Ole Miss in 2022 as a true freshman, led
Mm-hmm.
in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, scrimmage touchdowns as a true freshman. That is really, really impressive. And, saw some regression in terms of efficiency in his second season. But I mean, it's really hard to argue with 3 seasons of 1,000+ rushing yards, 3 seasons of 14+ rushing touchdowns, not overly involved as a receiver, but I think it just points to how safe the floor could be for a guy like Quinshon Judkins.
Yeah, he averaged a touchdown on every 16 carries. And what I love about Judkins, Kate, is that he was able to produce great numbers at 2 different conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, in 2 completely different styles of offense. One, a more wide open style with Lane Kiffin, and then one in a Chip Kelly offense. And yet the production really didn't fall off. We saw his workload go down a little bit at Ohio State, and that's only because they have Travion Henderson, who might end up being a first-round pick in the NFL draft, probably a top 40 pick, but you get the idea. I think he's pretty scheme independent. You could throw him on any offense, and he's going to find a way to be productive. And there just aren't that many running backs in this class that have that resume, have performed incredibly well in the big-time games. Go watch Judkins in the national championship game, scored 3 touchdowns. He was awesome there. Now, one of my concerns is that he does have a lot of work on his body. If you were watching with us on YouTube right now, you can see like almost 800 career touches. That's a lot for a running back over the 3 years, especially in that conference. That's not ideal, but you're also not spending a first-round pick in the NFL draft. It's a day 2 pick, and I just don't care as much when we're talking about a day 2 pick because so few of these running backs end up getting second contracts and playing into year 6, 7, and 8. I do think he's an NFL ready back that could be an immediate contributor from day 1.
I think that's all very fair points. And I do think there's a chance that Quinshon Judkins maybe falls in some of our dynasty drafts because, again, he doesn't have as many of these like super flashy elements to his game. You look at some of the running backs we've talked about so far. If you're new here to our rookie player profile series, we've talked about several running backs so far, and it feels like each of them kind of has their own calling card. Quinshon Judkins doesn't really have that one thing that makes him a super unique running back. And sometimes, and this is almost like, I don't want to say he's a boring running back, but it feels boring psychologically when you don't have any one big time superstar trait. I could picture him falling in dynasty rookie drafts because of that, because he doesn't have that sexy upside of an Ashton Genty.
He's not going to be as much fun to draft as Travion Henderson. And Travion Henderson is a better dynasty asset. So, but you get the idea. Like there's going to be other running backs in this class, like Dylan Sampson, who we'll talk about in an upcoming episode, who's just going to be more fun because he's got game-breaking speed. But I think Judkins is one of the most undervalued players in your rookie drafts. And I think he's going to end up finding himself into round 1. We'll talk about his dynasty value, Kate, in a little bit. But I want to dive into the analytics profile here and get into some of the numbers. We will do that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. There's times where I'll miss the opening tip-off, but I'll jump in midway through the second quarter, place my live bet, and we're ready to go. Plus, when you win on the app, you get paid instantly. It's one of the absolute best things about the app. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets, and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Kate, let's dive into the analytic profile of Quinshon Judkins. What do the numbers tell us?
All right, looking at the numbers for Quinshon Judkins, 2024 percentiles from PFF, they tell you exactly the type of story I think we've kind of been telling. Good at a lot of things, not great at any one particular thing. Rushing grade, 77th percentile for the running back position. Yards after contact per attempt, 35th percentile. Missed forced tackles, 57th percentile. Gap grade, 51st percentile. Receiving grade, 56th percentile. He's really good and balanced across the board. Just, again, not great in any one particular aspect of his game, which, again, is why I think people are going to look at this profile and maybe be a little bored in the kindest way.
Yeah, I get it. There's nothing about his profile that is dominating. And this is, again, when you watch the tape, it's the same way. So there's nothing that super stands out.
Dominator rating from player profile, 25.7%, 60th percentile this year. Again, playing in, Ohio State offense, to be expected. But again, nothing stands out.
I get it. I've got a couple of the numbers that I want to go through, and we do the same ones for every episode. First and 10 runs. This is the best indicator of how productive you are in the NFL against usually base defenses. 93 carries for 550 yards. That's 6.0 yards per carry. Pretty good. One of the other things I like to look at is how do you perform against the top teams in the nation? So if you look at top 25 teams, 4.8 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns, 102 receiving yards as well. And then one of the other ones that we like to look at is are your numbers declining as the season goes on? Kate, in January, so the college football playoffs, he averaged 6.0 yards per carry and scored 5 touchdowns in the college football playoffs. And again, that's with Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Travion Henderson. He was still putting up big numbers. The analytics say that he's more of a day 2 pick, and that's where I think he's going to land. But I don't know if he's got the high-end traits to be like a Bijan, a Jonathan Taylor. I think he's below that, but just below that.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about how quickly the quality of running backs kind of fall off here. You have your Bijans, your Jahmyr Gibbs. All of these guys are physically gifted athletes, right? Physically gifted players. Your Breece Halls, that have this, ideal size, speed, athleticism. Those guys are special, right? And then after that, there's a precipitous drop off because then you have guys like Bucky Irving, who had an absolutely incredible season, but doesn't necessarily have the draft capital, elite athleticism to go with that. You've got Chase Brown, who's got elite athleticism, but hasn't necessarily been super productive unless he's getting a boatload of volume. He hasn't been super efficient throughout his career. There are a lot of guys with question marks that I think, you can kind of piece together, some high-end traits, but none of them have, I think, as much balance as you're probably going to get from a Quinshon Judkins, especially given the fact that Judkins does, again, feel really foolproof. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter to me what kind of scheme he's going to, as long as he's getting touches, which, I think he's capable enough as a receiver. I think he is, again, just one of these guys that can kind of fit in just about anywhere.
So here, I want to go through some teams real quick, but here's my prediction with Judkins is that I think he's going to go somewhere between picks 50 to 75. Okay. So like more in the back half of round 2, top of round 3. And I'm going to predict right now that he ends up landing on a team that maybe we're not thinking. And let me give you some examples. Okay. I look at a team like the Buffalo Bills at 62 right now. I think
Marcus.
Well, listen, James Cook is an awesome running back. I don't know if
I got traded for James Cook this morning, Marcus.
I know.
So I don't like this. I don't like this.
That's just an example. I don't think he's going to land with the Bills, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills are on the clock and saying, hey, that's just the best player available. Buffalo actually has 2 late second-round picks, 56 and 63. The Chargers at 55 feel like a perfect scheme fit, right? Like him and Greg Roman's offense is perfect. I look at a team even like, oh man, some of these. Don't you think he would be like the perfect guy to be behind Derrick Henry for a year in Baltimore? And like in 2026, he's the lead guy. Like he's just going to come in as a rookie, get 7 or 8 touches, but in year 2 is going to be the full-time starter. I just think there's going to be teams like Baltimore and Kansas City who could use another running back at the end of round 2 that are just going to be like, he's too good of a player to pass up on.
I mean, I think any of these teams would be great landing spots. I don't love the Bills because that's going to push out another guy that we have currently ranked inside the top 10 of dynasty running backs. I don't like that, but I like all these other fits. And I think the whole point of doing this exercise is saying that, like, projecting a round 1 guy can be really difficult because it's hard for teams. It's a lot harder for teams to move around, trade up, move back. It's a lot harder to move draft capital in the first round because any moves in the first round are pretty darn costly from a draft capital standpoint, right? In the second round, you have more flexibility in terms of trading spots. You have more flexibility in terms of just like who owns what picks. Like you might have an interesting situation where he falls to a team that is already in a really good spot offensively, and he can kind of fit in as the last piece.
Again, let me give you my favorite. It's Kansas City. Kansas City has picks 63 and 66. Kareem Hunt was very effective for them last year, and they just got him off the street like early on in the season. I bet Isaiah Pacheco going into the last year of his contract, where Judkins excels is running between the tackles, and with the Chiefs bringing back Trey Smith, and they've got Creed Humphrey and Joe Thuney. That's one of the best interior offensive lines in the NFL. So bringing in Judkins to be a pocket mover, to move the chains, be the guy that's awesome in short yardage, I think it makes a ton of sense. And if he were to land with a team like the Chiefs or the Chargers or the Ravens, I don't see how he gets out of the first round of your dynasty drafts. I don't see it at all.
He doesn't.
No, he doesn't. Let's talk about his current dynasty value and some player comps for Quinshon Judkins. We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL Draft Show with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every single day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Kay, let's talk about some player comps before we get to the dynasty value. Did you have any good comps here for Judkins?
I have kind of a hybrid comp that I'm curious. And again, NFL comps are never my calling card. That's why I always go to you. You are the NFL comp guy. He almost reminded me of a mix between like a Zach Charbonnet and an Isaiah Pacheco combined. Like
I get it.
where
I
he's
get it.
got like a lot of the bruiser aspect, but the chaoticness of an Isaiah Pacheco when he's running the football.
That makes total sense to me. And that's why, like, I think David Montgomery is going to be the common comp, right? Because he's, that 5'11", 220-pound back that loves to play through contact. But I've been saying for months now, like the first time I saw Quinshon Judkins back when he was playing in high school, actually, I'm like, that's Kareem Hunt 2.0. Not the Kareem Hunt that we saw last year with the Chiefs, or not even the Kareem Hunt that we saw with the Browns, but like 2017, 2018 Kareem Hunt, who was like one of the best running backs in the league, where he doesn't have the home run speed. Kareem Hunt ran a 4.62, but it's just this slashing physical running back that can catch balls out of the backfield. He's an awesome, awesome pass protector, which means he's just going to be on the field every single down. And he's somebody that coaches trust. Again, I think Quinshon Judkins has a chance to land at a really good spot. And I'm very bullish on him. He's one of the guys that I absolutely want to make sure I'm leaving my rookie drafts with.
And this is why I think you can feel really comfortable, being in the back half of the first round in your dynasty rookie drafts. It's an interesting spot to be because I do think that, especially given, potential landing spots, etc., this is the type of player that could emerge as a big time value here in the back half of the first round, etc. Quinshon Judkins, I think in general, I like the idea of Kareem Hunt because I think, again, the biggest knock you mentioned, sort of that like long speed, the 40-yard dash time, not great. Quinshon Judkins, I don't think runs a 4.62, but
no, I think he's much faster than that. But it doesn't even really matter.
I think the whole thing is like, yeah, you might not get the long speed of, a guy with a little bit more burst, right? You're not going to get the long speed of a Dylan Sampson, but
No.
What you do get, I think, is plenty of burst at the line of scrimmage. And that's what makes the biggest difference for a player like Quinshon Judkins, versus a guy that relies solely on that long end speed.
So let's talk about his dynasty value. Kate, where is he being drafted right now among the other running backs, and where is he going right now in rookie drafts?
Well, one thing I want to point out before we move on to the dynasty value, Marcus, we've been checking out the consensus big boards for the NFL draft, which
I know
I'm sure we're about to see some major shakeups coming out of the combine. But heading into the combine, we did not have Quinshon Judkins on our radar as a top 5 running back on the consensus big boards. Now, again, this is your pet project. Every single offseason leading up to the NFL draft, you take the mock drafts and the consensus rankings, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yep.
To put together an NFL big board. And what I think is interesting, we have Caleb Johnson, we have Amari Hampton, Travion Henderson, Dylan Sampson, no Quinshon Judkins here in the top 5.
That's because they're wrong. It's not that. It's just, this is a really good running back class. And I think once you get outside, to me, the top 4 guys I think are pretty settled. There is some debate. Like maybe your team needs some more speed. Maybe you already have that grinding running back, and Dylan Sampson's that guy. I know some people are big fans of Cam Scatabo. I am not. I don't think the gap between like running back 4 and running back 8 in this class is all that big of a deal. So I'm not surprised to see him being ranked outside the top 5. I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Where he is being ranked inside the top 5 is in the latest batch of Dynasty Startup ADP, Dynasty Rookie ADP, RB5 behind Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, Travion Henderson, and Caleb Johnson. How does that feel for you right now? Just
Correct.
Ahead of Devin Neal, Dylan Sampson, again, guys who, maybe have, I don't know. I think
it feels right to me. Honestly,
yeah,
that feels like the right range. What I like about it is if you look at these rookie drafts that have been done in February, I mean, you can get Judkins a lot of times, like at the end of round 1. I've even seen a couple of these drafts where he falls into round 2. Like, and if I'm a team that just made your championship or the playoffs, and I get the chance to add Judkins to my roster without trading up, like that's a home run for me. That's why this class is not deep at receiver. The quarterbacks are awful. We have a couple good tight ends, but the running back depth is so strong that teams that are patient and just wait for running backs like Henderson and Judkins to fall to them are going to be very, very happy.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting draft class again, because I do think there are a lot of potential landing spots that would make, a potential third round pick, second round pick, first round pick. Like there are a lot of landing spots where I can picture a guy stepping in and immediately taking over the RB1 role this year. And
100%.
we know that this free agency class isn't great. So like this is going to be a draft where I think most teams are going in. If you need a running back, you're prioritizing that position through the draft rather than looking at free agency. And that's going to create a lot of opportunity. I have a few dynasty rosters, Marcus, where I'm looking and I'm like, running back's not looking great. Okay. This is the draft where I'm trying to just accumulate as many, mid to late first round picks, early second round picks, as many dart throws as I can. Just because I think there's going to be some depth here.
And I'm going to say this. I have one draft where I have the 3rd and 5th pick. I'm going to see if I can move down to like try to get 6, 7, 8 in this draft because I love the depth in this class. Yep. And you're right. Like most teams have bad running back situations in their dynasty leagues, unless you have Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan on the same team, right? Or Saquon Barkley. But I want to try to grab 2, 3, 4 of these running backs because the talent is so good. And then you don't have to worry about the running back position for the next couple of years. And I think Judkins is just one of the many names that we are going to be targeting in our rookie drafts. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. On Monday's show, we'll take a look at some of the biggest winners and losers from the NFL Scouting Combine for the 7 guys that I think are going to be running on Saturday. Maybe it'll be more than that. We'll see. So make sure you're on the lookout for that. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the combine. We'll see you right back here on Monday.